Hey guys, as many of you are probably aware, the official Scrabble Dictionary for North American play was just updated, and the new edition went into effect at the end of February. Now, several thousand words were added to the dictionary, so it definitely wouldn't be possible for me to cover all of them, or even a significant chunk of them in a video. So what I'm going to do today is, since I know everybody loves food, I'm going to be talking about some of the most notable new foods that were added to the Scrabble Dictionary. So it should be a lot of fun, and I hope you're all hungry and ready for our first course of new Scrabble food. We'll be starting off our meal with some Goetta, spelled G-O-E-T-T-A. Now, Goetta is a kind of sausage that's prepared with a grain such as oats, and it's usually served in a patty form, as you can see here in these pictures. Now, interestingly, Goetta, at least in the US, is found almost exclusively in the Cincinnati, Ohio, and surrounding areas. In fact, the actual definition in the new dictionary is a type of sausage popular in Cincinnati. Interestingly, I'd never heard of Goetta until about a year ago or so. I moved to central Kentucky in 2022, and at some point I was at this festival and there was a food truck serving this dish called Goetta I'd never heard of, but it looked really good, and I'm a fairly adventurous eater, so if I see a dish that looks good that I've never heard of, my first instinct is always going to be to try it. And I did try it, and it was actually quite good, so if you guys can find it wherever you are, or especially if you're ever in the Cincinnati, northern Kentucky area, I highly recommend you get your hands on some Goetta. You won't regret it, it's really good. However, what's also quite good is guanciale, spelled G-U-A-N-C-I-A-L-E. Now, guanciale is a fancy Italian word for pork jowl bacon. So what this is it's strips of bacon that are sourced specifically from the jowl or cheek of a pig. And this is another dish that I've had. It is really good, so if you're a meat eater, I highly recommend you give guanciale a shot if you haven't already, in addition to Goetta, as we talked about on the last slide. Now, if you're a vegetarian and can't have Goetta or guanciale, don't be alarmed, because there are plenty of vegetarian dishes that were just added to the Scrabble Dictionary. One of which is maitake, M-A-I-T-A-K-E. Now, a maitake is a kind of mushroom. This is another dish that I've eaten before, really, really good, and I feel like it's about time that this was added to the dictionary, because there are several other mushrooms that are similarly named that have already been valid for quite some time. For instance, shiitake, spelled with either one I or two I's, inokitake, as well as matsutake, were all already valid. So, like I said, about time that maitake joined the rest of its fellow mushrooms in the Scrabble Dictionary. Our next food is one that could potentially be sautéed and go really well with some maitake. This one is zouk, Z-U-K-E, which is short for zucchini. So now, instead of having to say, I'm going to go get some zucchini and saute it, or I'm going to go make zucchini bread, you can just say, I'm going to saute up some zouk for dinner, or I'm going to make some zouk bread for dessert. Doesn't that sound tasty? Now, besides just being a really good vegetable in general, zouk is also going to be a very, very useful Scrabble word, because it's only 4 letters long, so it's not that hard to play, and it also has a Z and a K. So if you happen to have a Z and a K on your rack, this could yield big scores. So, like I said, a great food and also a great word to have as an asset for Scrabble players. Our fifth food is za'atar, spelled Z-A-A-T-A-R. This is a spice mixture of Middle Eastern origin that is really, really good. I've had it a couple times as well. It's particularly popular on flatbreads and sometimes on breadcrumbs. Very, very flavorful, and also, I should mention, like zouk, a potentially very useful Scrabble word. It is 6 letters long, so it's a little bit tougher to get down than zouk, but at the same time, if you have a Z and a lot of A's, it could be a great way to both get rid of some clunky tiles as well as score a lot of points. So, really good word to keep in mind, both for Scrabble and also something to try next time you're out at a Middle Eastern restaurant. The sixth course of this meal is probably the one, at least if you ask me, whose absence from previous editions of the Scrabble Dictionary is the most surprising. And it's none other than stromboli. Stromboli is a pretty popular Italian meat dish. I've certainly had it many times, and I would expect that most of my viewers have either had it before or at least are familiar with it. So, like I said, pretty surprising that this wasn't already valid. Now, that being said, it's not going to be a real game changer. As a 9-letter word, it's pretty difficult to play. You need to play through 2 tiles already on the board, either connected or disconnected, like maybe through a BO on the board or something. So it would be a really, really nice play, almost certainly a bingo if you were to get this down in a game. Not likely, but certainly possible, and still a good word to keep in mind. We're going to be sticking with the theme of Italian meat dishes, and now discussing a type of sausage that I had to look up the pronunciation for. It's apparently Nduja, spelled N-D-U-J-A. Once again, it's not Nduja, it is Nduja. This is a type of spreadable sausage of Italian origin. And this is actually, guys, the first dish so far in this video that I personally have not tried. And if you ask me, it looks really good. So I'd love to try it sometime. If anybody watching this video has had andouille before, comment, let me know how it was, and whether I should be as excited as I am to try it. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention that andouille will also be a very useful word over the Scrabble board, just because there are a bunch of short words with a J already in the dictionary, but relatively few that don't start with a J. If you think about it, most 3, 4, 5 other words that have a J have the J at the beginning of the word. So a word like andouille that has the J in the middle of the word could prove very useful. We're now going to move on to our 8th dish of this video, which is birria, B-I-R-R-I-A. This is another meat dish. This one I have had multiple times before. Really, really good. It is a Mexican slow-cooked beef dish, very popular in tacos and burritos. Again, highly, highly recommend that you guys try it if you haven't already. It's especially good with dips. It's often served with like sour cream and other similar dips. Very, very good stuff. We'll be sticking with the Mexican theme for our 9th dish, which, at least as far as Scrabble utility is concerned, may be the most useful word of this video. And it is none other than queso, Q-U-E-S-O. And the reason this is so useful as a word in Scrabble is simply because it has a Q, and the Q is the worst tile in Scrabble, so every single additional word we get with the Q that allows you to either score points with the Q or just unload it is very useful, and I expect we're going to see queso on a lot of Scrabble boards starting very soon. Now, I'm guessing most viewers are familiar with queso, but in case you aren't, definitely try it. It's really, really good. I've had it so many times. It's a thick, cheesy dip, often served with chips. Can't go wrong with queso. And finally, we'll be staying with the Mexican theme once again as we finish off our meal with a cocktail. This time we'll be having a marg, which of course is short for margarita. Margaritas come in several varieties. You can get them frozen with different kinds of fruits, and especially if cocktails are your thing, definitely highly recommend a marg, especially with some queso and birria earlier in the meal. Now, our meal of new dishes in the Scrabble Dictionary is over, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it, but this video is not over. In addition to the good, I want to talk about the bad. There are a couple of food-related additions to the new dictionary that are extremely strange looking and, in some cases, just downright silly or even stupid. And I feel like I would be remiss not to at least address those. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I'm talking about. The first highly questionable food addition I want to look at is possibly the most infamous addition to the entire new Scrabble Dictionary. And it is gratinade with 3 E's in a row. G-R-A-T-I-N-E-E-E-D. Now, this is the only word in the new Scrabble Dictionary, new or old, that has 3 E's in a row, which makes it extremely bizarre. Gratinade was already a word with 2 E's in a row, and it is a French cooking term referring to a dish with a browned crust of breadcrumbs and grated cheese. But what makes the 3 E's in a row so weird is that it's inconsistent, because say pureed with 3 E's, a hypothetical word of P-U-R-E-E-E-D, was not added to the dictionary. And I would think if the verb gratiner, which ends in 2 E's, could take an ED with a 3rd E, then why couldn't puree? Because they're both French terms having to do with food or cooking, and they're both verbs. So if one took an ED, then why not the other? Like, I'd be more okay with this if both gratinade and pureed were good with 3 E's, but to have one good with 3 E's and one only good with 2 E's just really doesn't make a lot of sense. So gratinade, once again with 3 E's, it gets the top spot here on my list of highly questionable food additions, and as I said, it's one of the most hotly debated and frequently cited example of where maybe the dictionary committee went wrong, so very controversial word here that was added to the Scrabble Dictionary just a few days ago. Number 2 is another French term, and it is mirepoix. M-I-R-E-P-O-I-X-S. And mirepoix, without the S on the end, was already a valid word. It is a French vegetable dish, and what's so bizarre about this is the word ends in XS. There are no other words in the entire dictionary that end in XS, so this feels awfully bizarre. Now, it is technically phonetically acceptable, I suppose, because it's pronounced mirepoix, so you could just put an S and say mirepoix, which is, I assume, how this word would hypothetically be pronounced. But you just don't see French words that end in X pluralizing with an S at the end. Like, this is just not how it's typically handled. So, again, just a very bizarre addition to the dictionary. But that being said, mirepoix is a tasty vegetable dish, and going back to the last slide, I've certainly had dishes cooked gratinade style, and they are quite good. So I will give at least that to these additions. Now, speaking of strange French additions, we have another one here, and this is one that is phonetically unacceptable because the singular is roux, R-O-U-X, which is was already in the dictionary before the update. And roux is a type of gravy-like sauce made from flour and fat. But the problem is here, I don't even know how to pronounce this word, guys. Is it roux, which then changes the soft X in roux to a hard X? Like, you don't say roux, you say roux. Or is it roues, or something like that, which just, I mean, it sounds awful. Like, I just don't even know how to possibly pronounce this word. And again, like I said on the last slide, these French words ending in soft X's just typically pluralize as themselves. They don't take an S or an ES in the French language. I mean, I'm no expert on French, don't get me wrong, but I've seen enough of it to know that's just not typically how it works. So again, very, very bizarre addition, and yeah, not exactly sure how to make sense of it. But in any case, I've never had roux before, but it does look quite tasty. We'll be moving away from French for our final word of this section and of this video. However, in this case, guys, it's not actually a word getting added I find so troubling, it's the lack of a word getting added. So since it's still not a word, I guess I'll say I'm referring to the concept of a steakhouse. Now, I'm sure that everybody, if not almost everybody watching this video has heard of a steakhouse, so you might be wondering, wait a minute, how the heck is steakhouse not an acceptable word in Scrabble? And the short answer is, I don't know. I'm just as confused as you guys are. And the long answer is, well, there's no long answer, because the more you dive into this, guys, the more bizarre it even seems. First, let me mention that steakhouse wasn't taken out of the dictionary. It's not like steakhouse used to be a word. Steakhouse was never a word. As far as I know, there is no previous edition of the Scrabble Dictionary where steakhouse was a valid word. And a lot of people noticed this and were clamoring for steakhouse to be added in this update because it certainly seems like steakhouse should be a valid word. However, it was not added, so as such, steakhouse is still an invalid word as far as the game of Scrabble is concerned. And what makes this even weirder is that there are several other very similar words ending in house that are valid and have been valid for quite some time. The most strikingly similar is chop house. Chop house is basically defined as the same thing as a steakhouse. It's defined as a restaurant or establishment that serves cuts of meat, including steak. So if chop house is a word and means basically or exactly the same thing as steakhouse, then why wouldn't steakhouse be a word? It really just doesn't make sense. There are many other words, too, that end in house that are types of food establishments like bakehouse and smokehouse that are valid. So when you consider all this, guys, it just really doesn't make sense. I have no logical explanation whatsoever for why steakhouse is not a valid word. And yeah, if anybody watching this video has a convincing theory for why steakhouse isn't a word and why it shouldn't be a word, I'd certainly love to hear it. And with that, I guess one moral of this video is that there always has been and continues to be a good deal of arbitrariness in the Scrabble Dictionary. And I think that's something, guys, that's just going to be inherent when you're dealing with a word list as large as the Scrabble Dictionary is. There's going to be some words in there that some people think are ridiculous and other people think should totally be words. It's just kind of part of the deal. And I think it's important to just focus not so much on that aspect of it, but focus on enjoying the game, because Scrabble really is such an awesome game, and also focusing on all the cool words that are in there, like all the tasty foods we've been talking about today. So I hope you guys all have a chance to try all these foods if you haven't already. I know for me, I'm very excited to hopefully soon try andouille for the first time. So that's it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video and maybe learned a couple new words and learned about a couple new foods, and I will see you soon for the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.